What's going on, everyone? Bardown Breakdown, back at it. And we've got a super special guest, episode 102. We're here with Nate Zuercher of Judah and the Lion, which is kind of wild to me since Judah and the Lion are like this like enormous force in the alternative world. So we're super stoked to have you. What's going on, man? How are you?
Oh, dude, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm doing well. Really glad to be hanging out with y'all. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just to jump right into it. So your second record, is Full Cop and Roll, which is kind of like really a mix of the three things that you guys do and do well. That being folk music, hip hop, and rock and roll, kind of just smashing them all together. So it makes sense that, you would just kind of put it out there and be like, well, this is what we're going to call ourselves and kind of define this mesh of genres. So I guess the first question I have for you is, where did your love for folk music start? Did it start when you were young or when you were a little older? How did you come to love it so much?
Yeah, I would say kind of late middle school was probably when I first got introduced, and Nickel Creek was sort of the gateway for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I still am really into this, but like pop punk and metal were my first sort of loves in the music world. So I was really into that, and when I was starting to learn guitar, and then when I heard Nickel Creek, I was kind of like, this is the folk version of metal, and I really kind of resonate with what's going on, and not that I totally understand it, but it sort of hits those same feels for me. So after that, I think John Butler was the next guy that really sort of brought me in, the guitar player, and the combo of those two just sort of changed what I maybe preconceived, which maybe was more like a singer-songwriter vibe or something like that. That was still interesting, but I've always been more on the music side of things rather than the lyrical. So I still struggle to, even like if you asked me to quote some of our own lyrics or all of that, I'd have a little bit of trouble. So I'm paying attention to other things. And so kind of got into more acoustic stuff. I got a dobro and a mandolin just for fun. And then when I graduated high school, my sort of mentor had an old banjo laying around, and so was like, hey, maybe you'd like this.
Sweet.
And that was the same summer that I heard about Mumford and Sons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was really when it all
all started going. Yeah, it's one of the things I've found is there's being a big alternative guy, there's like a big market for kind of like folk punk and stuff, with bands like, I guess you might say like, maybe like the first Against Me record or two kind of have some of those vibes, and then like AJJ and like all that kind of stuff, which is super cool. But so you said that kind of started when you started playing guitar, and then you picked up the dobro and like the mandolin and the banjo and stuff. So you started with an actual guitar, and then you kind of graduated to some of the more folkier instruments from there.
Yeah, definitely. And tried different things, and with a knowledge of how to play guitar, you can kind of dabble on different instruments, but banjo was the first one that I really, I guess, started taking lessons on and wanted to really understand, to now we're the point where I'd say that's my first instrument, and guitar is not. So yeah.
So for our listeners out there that might not be super familiar with like the banjo and the mandolin and stuff like that, we're talking like really a completely different style of playing. Because I mean, granted, you can finger pick a guitar, of course, but primarily, I guess, on a banjo, that's really what you're doing. You're finger picking, and of course the tuning of a banjo is a lot different from a guitar. So just, I guess, give us a little bit of insight, and for our listeners, what is it like to transition from playing a guitar to playing a banjo?
Right. So there's a 4-string, a 5-string, and a 6-string banjo. But the 5 is the traditional American bluegrass kind. So that's what I've primarily focused on, sort of dabbled on the other two. But when you listen to bluegrass, that's the typical kind you're hearing. So, as far as like finger movement and dexterity and finger picking, a lot of that did transfer over from guitar. But you're right that there are different tunings. That's another thing for me that I was sort of used to, especially listening to John Butler, because he has all these wacky tunings that actually I think helped me get more into banjo and have a better understanding of that. And I still, like, if you come to our shows and watch me play, I'm swapping banjos constantly, and that's mainly because I'm changing tunings and getting handed off to those different sort of setups. So definitely some similarities, and you don't have to finger pick, like you can strum, and there's different techniques, but again, the sort of traditional bluegrass American way of playing is a 3-finger picking style that I would say is primarily what I do. But I also feel like I am constantly getting away with something and breaking rules. If there was a traditionalist watching or something like that. But
well, I think that's one of the like most refreshing things about like Judah and the Lion in general is that like you are taking all of these genres and meshing them together. But like even with Pep Talks, listening through Pep Talks, I mean, you guys have like such a range in what you guys are doing. You've got songs that are like real pop driven, and then you've got the I mean, I'm going to talk about it later, but like I'm going to launch into sports and how I think that's just like just a fantastic thing to put on the record. But even right in the middle of your record, you've got Queen Song's Human, which is like an 8-minute song, which you wouldn't expect to be on this record. But then again, there it is. And I feel like the last 4 minutes of that song is almost like reminds me of like an Explosions in the Sky song. It's just like, and I think that depth is what makes you guys so fantastic. So on that note, when you guys, go into the studio to write, and when you start to kind of build these sounds and you start to layer and stuff, is it ever, I guess the question I have is like, as far as featuring specific instruments, like, do you go in and say, okay, well, we want this song to be a little bit more banjo heavy, or we want this one to be more mandolin heavy, or we want this one to be a little bit more straightforward, like rock and roll? How does that come to be? Like, are the songs written specifically for each feel, or do you go in and kind of flesh them out when you're in the studio?
I think we're still figuring that out, and I think it looks different each time. I guess if you were to look back at every song we've put out, the only thing that's consistent, I think, is that there's a banjo in every song.
Okay.
And I guess Judah's always singing.
Yeah. Okay.
But otherwise, like, Brian plays mandolin on every song, but he sometimes has more of an electric guitar style tone on that. So I would say it's even more of just an electrical guitar. So with that, it's, I guess the only thing we know that we have to do in some regard is get a banjo on there. But like even with our song Spirit that just came out more recently, I guess for me, I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do I just do exactly the right part? And I guess, I'll admit that I've gotten that wrong for sure. But I think it was my jazz band teacher growing up that he would say that the real good players are the ones that know when not to play.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm trying to find the right pockets of space for me to be in that really will help the song, rather than, staying on my pedestal that makes me think, oh, the banjo's the best thing in the world and I should be on everything. And so I think it's a balance of each of us figuring that space out, and trying to, I think our goal is always to serve the song best. And so that's why we have so many different feels and maybe styles of songs, rather than having a more consistent sound. And I think in some ways that's been a huge gift to have that freedom, but has also sort of shot us in the foot, I imagine, with certain folks and listeners, or they may really like one song and then the next one comes on and they're like, what the hell is this shit? And so I think it's been somewhat hard to, especially earlier on. And I think the Full Cop and Roll record was maybe our sort of like coming out record in a lot of ways, of saying, hey, we like all these things. We're just going to try this out and see if it works. And I think a few years later, we're starting to really hit that sweet spot with trusting ourselves. But there was definitely a period where we had to like qualify everything. And I think if Take It All Back hadn't resonated with people as well as it did, I don't know what would have happened. But it felt like that was sort of our saving grace after a big leap of faith, and grateful we still get to try things and have that freedom.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting things, talking about musicians having to like earn the right. Not that it should be a thing. You really shouldn't have to, like earn the right to be diverse in how musical you want to be. But I guess sometimes you really kind of have to do that. Like when you look at, um, like I don't know, to even talk about like Dylan, for example, right? Bob Dylan, right? So I mean, you've got the classic albums that that were more straightforward that he wrote in the '60s and even into the '70s, and then all of a sudden, come late '70s, early '80s, he's branching out and like writing a lot of different, more like rock inspired music. But it's like, he paved the path for all of these musicians, I should say. So it's like, Bob Dylan can do whatever he wants. Like if Bob Dylan wants to, write like a 13-minute song that's just him pissing in a pot, like you've earned that. So, but I think it's an interesting dichotomy to talk about because, as artists, I mean, I don't think that you really have to earn that right to do what you want to do. And I mean, I think it's a great thing that, you had a song that really, really stuck out and resonated with people. But now, after, Take It All Back. And I mean, like, even listening to like Beautiful Anyway, which is, one of the more recent things you guys have put out, which is fantastic. It's like, if you guys decided in 2022 that you were just going to write a folk record, like who gives a shit if you're alienating your fans? Because in reality, like it's your art, so do what you want with your art. But I guess, I'm jaded in so much that way because there's so much music that I love that didn't fit the mold, and some of my favorite bands that wrote different records that everyone poo-pooed on. But for me, it's just like, well, there's no way in hell that you can be 16 and write a record and then be 35 and be expected to write the same record that you wrote when you're 16. It's just impossible.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's sort of a balancing act, because even for Dylan, that second or third record, I'm sure there were a lot more expectations than his 10th or 11th record. And that's sort of what you're saying. Yeah. He's earned it. So it's definitely a balancing act of like, okay, I want to be able to do this for a living. And so if that's true, we have to figure out some sort of trust level.
Yeah. Some sort of conformity. Yeah.
Yeah. But true. Like for a long time, we were just the new Mumford and Sons, or, comparing to us constantly to people. And I think part of that is because we're so out in left field. People are like, we have to try and throw you in some kind of box. But yeah. I'm curious. I'm always curious to see where we'll go next, but it does feel like we're coming back a little bit on, or learning how to take some of our roots, more of the folky side. Because as much as we love experimenting and trying all these other things, and because of all of our influences and stories, I think we can do a good job at many things. But I think we're starting to appreciate more that the folk side is maybe more where we feel at home. And so, and you can see that, I think this year in particular with our releases, that we're trying to sort of expound on that, which I love because, I think that is my favorite thing to play. At least I don't listen to folk and bluegrass as much as I enjoy playing it, but which I guess is interesting. But I've had seasons, so.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm more of the history guy of
okay.
the two, and I like to follow like a timeline. So when I was looking up your history as a band, it goes back to Belmont University. So yep. You guys just like lived in the same dorm, took some classes together. Like, how did you link up to end up forming Judah and the Lion?
Yeah, so Belmont in Nashville is not officially a music school, but draws a lot of musicians. I think largely just because of the environment that it's in. But Brian and I were both in the same guitar program. We started as guitar majors and then switched to banjo and mandolin respectively. And so just naturally had some opportunities to play together, and we were hanging out, kind of had a similar friend group. So Judah called me through a mutual friend, sort of looking to make a small record that was more bluegrass style. He'd typically been doing more of the rock sort of stuff and just felt like that wasn't meshing with the songs he was writing. And so he wanted to try a few other things, and it was super common to get together and jam and just sort of mess around on instruments and stuff like that. So he called me, and I was like, sure, I don't know. I wasn't saying no to anything at that point. And he and I had never met before, but had both heard about each other. He was kind of the all-star baseball player at the school, first baseman, sort of legend. I don't know, and just a really good guy. So had heard about him quite a bit. And I guess I was the sort of homeless looking bearded banjo player that sat around campus all the time. And I got together, really connected, and he asked me to bring along any other folk players I knew. So brought Brian, and three of us just really hit it off really well towards the end of 2011. And we recorded that small record. And I think for Judah, initially, he was just like, I'm going to make this project and that'll be it. And I was the one that sort of like, hey, this is really special. We should think about keeping this going. And it's been a massive process, but at the same time, I think we've had a lot of really fortunate opportunities and events that have happened for us. And it's pretty wild that I guess coming up at the end of this year, it'll be 10 years. So
awesome.
Still doing
Congrats.
it.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. So
Thank
does
you.
like the student union like hit you guys up every year to play like your spring fling or whatever?
I don't totally know. I don't get contacted about that stuff, and I don't hear about everything, but we have done a few, I guess, sort of discussion, or we've spoken at different events at the school as sort of panels and things like that. And I don't know. Maybe we've been asked to do things that I'm not aware of, but they definitely are very proud of us. And I think we're still in their like sort of video that sort of shows off their programs and stuff like that. And
yeah, like they probably show to all of the students. They're just like, look at these guys. Look what these guys are doing. You could do this too if you come to Belmont University.
Right. Yeah. I think we're one of those groups that they sort of show off in that way.
Yeah, it's
so
like it's like SUNY Cortland just literally just shows like a bunch of reels of like Mick Foley getting thrown off of like the Hell in the Cell, and that's really all they do, right, Mikey?
Well, yeah, no one even knows SUNY Cortland other than people that live in New York. So Nate has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's nodding my head. Like, absolutely.
So, Nate, you're originally from Colorado or the Nashville area?
Yeah, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Went to school in Nashville, and I've kind of moved around a bunch, and I'm living back in Colorado now. So it's good to be home.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you find that like your like allegiance had shifted when you were in the Nashville area because of like just how awesome it is in downtown Nashville for the Preds?
I think in some ways, it is a really electric and fun city, and exciting place to be. And I love sports, and so anytime I guess something exciting is going on, it's fun to latch on. And the Preds have definitely been a fun team to watch lately. But I think too, like it became really obvious, when we're playing each other, it's like, all right, it's very clear who I care about right now. And maybe wasn't as sure before, but I think we played each other in the playoffs 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just so obvious that I cared about Colorado a lot more. And two, like I always wanted to get out of here and be able to go pursue the music dream, and this didn't feel like the place to do that. But at the same time, as soon as I left, I was like, there's no place like it, and I can't wait to come back. So my allegiance to Colorado has stayed true. I think the one exception is the Nashville Soccer Club. I would probably root for over Colorado Rapids, but that's also largely in part because we've been involved in sort of the development of the or the team culture, and we got to write their sort of team chant song that they play at the beginning and end of every game. And so I think with that, I feel like I have to, but I also want to root for Nashville. But every other, like Broncos playing Titans, for sure going for the Broncos. Avs play Preds, absolutely going for the Avs. Yeah.
So you're Avalanche fandom. Let's trace it back. So, are we like talking like Sakic Forsberg days? Like, is that where it started, or was it a little bit later? On in life. When did you start? Becoming an Avs fan?
Yeah, I think think it was 1999 was my first game. One of my dad's best friends took me. We played the Coyotes and won 6-1.
Nice.
And,
there you go.
It was just, I got really spoiled that game. I got really spoiled in general growing up. It's like, so next year we won the cup, and it's like, oh, this happens every 5 years. And, Broncos had just won 2 Super Bowls, and I was like, all right, like, this is going to be amazing. And then the droughts came that we're still in. But, so Forsberg, Sakic, Adam Foote, Alex Tanguay, Chris Drury, all those guys, Rob Blake. But I think going to that game really was like, okay, this is special. This is something I care about. But, when they won the cup against the Devils in 2001, I was in southwestern Colorado on a family vacation, and my mom took me to the bar to watch Game 7. And I was the youngest kid in the bar. And that was, I think, when I really was like, okay, this is my game. And Forsberg is still my favorite player ever. Every jersey I get, no matter the team or sport, I always customize it with my name and 21 on it. And so he's just stuck with me a ton. But in general, very fond memories of all those guys. And so I guess I'm 29 now. So I was, I think, 8 years old when I went to that first game. It's been rad.
So you must you were probably pretty young, but you must remember when they got the team. Like, you were probably like 5 or 6 at that point, right? So like, I'm sure you remember the excitement in the city.
Totally. And I think I was a little, like, my parents aren't hockey fans. If anything, they're really big Broncos fans. And so I remember, particularly at a young age, watching Broncos games and making a bigger deal out of that. But I think when I got to go to the Avs game, that was really when I was like, okay. And I'm sure that I, heard about them coming a couple of years before, but I think I didn't have anyone around me that was helping me be excited or able to appreciate that was what it was. So I think that second Stanley Cup was when I really was like full in.
Oh yeah. Hopefully once in my lifetime I'll experience just one. But
this is the time. I feel like a lot of people are saying this year might be the time for y'all. I could see Colorado and Islanders maybe going. That'd be spicy.
That would be real spicy.
Yeah, especially since you got our boy Devon Tays now, so that'd be a nice storyline.
Yeah. Am I wrong on that? I feel like I heard people saying Islanders are
I've never heard
looking really good this year.
Well, we look good, but no one in the media ever gives us any credit. They like to poo-poo on us.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
It's not your fault. It's just, that's just the Islanders are that team where they really don't have like a bona fide star. I mean, like there's Matt Barzal, who's great, but it's like, when you look at, the Caps or the Penguins or, even the Avs, like, there's not like a big time star on the team. And because of that, most of the political pundits out there, I shouldn't say political pundits, that's just the word I've just been saying a million times, but the sports pundits and the hockey generalists out there are just like, the Islanders are good. Maybe they'll just creep into the playoffs, and that's about it. Last year everyone was saying that the Capitals were going to demolish us, and we ended up making it to the conference finals. But
right.
But so talking about that second cup win, the other thing that made that pretty incredible was that Ray Bourque got to raise a cup. So I mean, that probably would have put you a little bit older. Do you remember specifically when the Avs ended up getting Ray Bourque in that trade and the kind of buzz around Colorado at the time?
Totally. Yeah. And remember vividly him picking that up. And I think if anything, I didn't totally understand the history of who he was maybe. But I remember how big of a deal it was. And obviously he came in and made a huge presence known. He wasn't just the old skipper that everyone wanted to get a cup, but he really played like he, still had it and deserved it. And so as my young, ignorant 10-year-old self, just glad to see a guy come in and crush it. And obviously could appreciate that it was really meaningful, but I think it was later on. And I know it's taboo to be a fan of Boston, being from Colorado for different reasons. But I really do love it out there, and I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff with the Bruins, and like we played the Winter Classic with them last year, and that was really special. And so I'm again taboo. I love the Red Sox. As a Rockies fan, that's really messed up, and I'm sorry to all of those folks. But so I hate the Patriots. I'll say that. That's my
all right. So that's
thing.
good. That's good. At least you hate the Pats.
Yeah, we have that. But I think that's all given me a better awareness of Ray Bork's story and what happened and why it was so important for him to finally get that at the end of his career. So.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and you just touched on it, so we might as well just launch right into it because we don't get an opportunity to, talk to guys that have played the Winter Classic before. So I just love to hear how you were approached about that and what that experience was like.
Yeah, some of those things I don't totally know how or why we got the opportunity. I think particularly for Judah and I, we're really big sports fans. And so to match music with sports in a lot of ways just kind of naturally makes sense to us. But anything that comes up like that, we're definitely jumping on. Or, we get a lot of opportunities to be asked, like, what do you want to do? What would be your kind of your dreams or your goals or venues or situations you want to play at? And so our team, amazingly, through tons of hard work and their connections, has been able to make a lot of those come to fruition. But yeah, I don't know if we ever asked to specifically play the Winter Classic, but I think I don't know if they're at ESPN. We have a lot of stuff we do with ESPN, so I feel like that may be. Is it put on by ESPN? Do y'all know?
NBC Sports Network.
Okay,
NBC Sports, yeah.
So no, that's not the connection. But and again, some of these things I just let the team work on them and let us know how they are coming. But we've definitely put a foot forward to say we want to be involved in sports related things, and putting out, the song Sports didn't hurt any of that. And also just, I think when people get to actually talk with us and realize like, we're not just saying crap, like we actually care and are invested in these things. Like a lot of the college football stuff we've gotten, I think, is because Judah's such a big UT fan. Okay. And as soon as you talk to him and get to know his family, it's really obvious that that's like a blood thing with his family, and multi-generational and a big deal. So a lot of that has come. And then for me, it's more the hockey, soccer, extreme sports side of things that we've gotten to do.
Sure.
And Brian loves lots of things. I don't know if he's super passionate about sports, but he's always down and excited to be a part of whatever.
So as part of playing the Winter Classic, like what level of access did you get? Like, did you get to meet, any of the players? Did you get to interface with them? Like, what was just that experience like for you guys?
We didn't get to meet any players, unfortunately. I never know with some of those things too, if like we pushed for it, we'd be able to, but I think there's sort of an understanding that we have in the same way that, I don't necessarily want to be bothered a whole lot before we go perform or something like that, just kind of let them do their thing. And, but I think the coolest part was just getting to, like, the morning of, it was snowing and we're in Notre Dame at the stadium, and got to go in and sound check at, I think it was like 9 a.m, and explore and run around the stadium and be down on the field and all that stuff. And so that's maybe the most fun part of it. It's just sort of getting to have all access to different areas of what you wouldn't normally get to. But even like going to the game was super special. I'd never been to an outdoor hockey game. Hope I get to go to a lot more, but that was a really unique experience to be with 80,000 fans. And I was pulling for Boston. But it would have been more meaningful if it was Colorado, but that's okay. So getting to do that, and then going through the same tunnel that the players went through and getting to walk down there on the field to perform, I think that was really special, and got to see them up close. We didn't talk to anyone again, but they're all really big. They're really big guys. So that was pretty nutty. Yeah, and Weezer was there. So
I was just gonna say that. I'm pretty sure Weezer played there too. So that's cool.
We've done a few things with them too, and so that's interesting. to be in that spot, but it's always good to see them, and they're veterans in what we're trying to do, and so getting to watch their kind of decisions and how they handled things, and they played before us too, so we got to sort of watch them and how they were going to do it. But yeah, it was amazing. The production level of it and how they put it all together, how much is going on at once, how much they have down on the field, because the field is like 4 times bigger than the rink, and how they make that feel like it's still entertaining. And also, I think I was sitting like sort of at the 50-yard line, probably halfway up the stands, and I still felt like I was right there with it. So that was interesting too, to still feel involved and like you could see what's going on, and the energy was pretty rad. So
cool. And then
I don't know, I
guess the same year, pretty much, you're on the NHL 2020 soundtrack. Like, I'm assuming bucket list, items for you. So, can you tell us, like, were you super stoked when you found out that you were going to be on the soundtrack?
Absolutely. I think NHL 2003 was the first one that I played that I really remember, and the soundtrack on that game was massive for me. I think Madden and NHL that year defined a lot of who I would end up loving. I think like Good Charlotte and Avenged Sevenfold and Gob, and
I think Brand New was even on that one.
Brand New, yep. Unwritten Law, a few others, just like still bands that I love today, that I really do like what they do, but like the nostalgia factor bring me back to those years are really important. So every year those have been a source of me finding new music that I get excited about, and obviously love the games and the sports that they're about. But we became friends with a guy named Steve that's largely in charge of making all the music happen on those games, and was too back then. And so we got to meet him and sort of say what I just said now. And he's like, yeah, I remember hanging out with Avenged Sevenfold and making the deal that got them on like 6 of our games. And
we need to talk to Steve. We've been because we've actually talked to a few artists who have also been on the NHL soundtrack, and we're like, who's the guy that like comes up with this? Because he clearly is in touch. Like, he clearly knows like good alternative music. Like, who is this guy? And no one knows, but now we know it's Steve. So
his name's Steve. And he's a legend. He's one of those people you sit with and you're like, oh my gosh, like the stuff that he says, you're just like, what? And he knows everybody. But I think my favorite part was that he was so adamant, and I think you can tell, and it's one of those things that once I know this, and maybe you all will agree, but like he's very adamant about every game, and he's lost a lot of the control on Madden, so that's not as true on that side. But he's trying to make new artists known and bring people in that aren't as familiar, that really create a vibe that supports what's going on and trying to help their career along, and instead of just going for the big sort of pop or hip hop artists that maybe would be sort of the throw-ins. But so we got FIFA and NHL in the same year. That was insane. Those two things for me were particularly like, every meeting we've had with this sort of like, what do you want to be on? Like, I'm like, I want to be on these things for years. But finally, when we got to hang out with Steve, that was when it really took hold, and he's involved in a lot of stuff. And he was also the guy that connected us with the Nashville Soccer Club stuff we got to do. And so very well connected and very kind and encouraging. And I'm thankful that he cared enough about us to give us that opportunity. But that was definitely like, I have a sort of trophy shelf over here, and both NHL 20 and FIFA 20 are right at the center, along with our Red Rocks trophy we got when we got to play there. But those are like the 3 main things for me so far. I'm like,
I mean, so yeah, let's talk about that though. I mean, Red Rocks is just like I've never been. I've only seen pictures, and I just watched a couple of months ago, Phoebe Bridgers played like an incredible set at Red Rocks. But I mean, I hear it's just like a transformative experience. So, and then I'm sure you've seen performances at Red Rocks, but being on the other side of that, what's that experience like?
It's incredible. Grew up going there for sure. My parents have played there. They're in the symphony, so they've gotten to do a lot of the sort of backing group stuff. So it's been kind of a family thing for me ever since I remember. And
Cool.
yeah, it's everything everyone says. I think it's one of the only experiences I've ever had too where it exceeded my expectations of what it would be like. As cheesy as it sounds, time did move slow. Like it felt like a 4-hour show compared to our hour and a half set we normally do. And that was a really good thing. Like it just felt like I was finally able to really appreciate something we were doing. Because it's hard for me not to look forward to the next thing or be like, okay, we did it. What's next? Yeah. So that was really special and meaningful. Like I'm still sort of processing because for me, that was kind of, if you were to ask me growing up, like, what do you want to do? What's your dream? It would be to headline Red Rocks. And I used to say like, and then I could die. And so it's kind of been like, okay, really though, I've done the thing that I wanted to do. And so what does it look like to still be motivated and have goals and have a better maybe awareness of how to appreciate those things? But that's a whole other talk, I'm sure. But I mean, it's magical. Like all the tunnels you can go through that are secret, like all the green rooms that have part of the rocks kind of creating the wall and that you can climb on them, and it feels like a playground in some ways back there. And I just was a kid the whole day, and all of us, I think more than any other show or anything we've done, had family and friends fly in for that. And so it almost felt like more of a wedding reception than a normal show. Like I had a rehearsal dinner type vibe the night before with all like my friends that flew in, and everyone gave speeches and stuff. And so I don't know, it was a very magical celebratory event and our entire team was there too, which never happens, like flew in from all over the country it just was a very celebratory kind of like, all right, way to go, everybody. Let's take this in. And I'm really glad it happened when it did, because, summer 19, if it was scheduled for 20, it wouldn't have happened, and who knows what it would. Yeah. So I feel like we got it in kind of before all this went down, and I don't know. So very grateful. I'm also not trying to like list off stuff we've done and then be like, let's talk about how rad we're getting.
Well, and it's really funny because I was just going to ask you, so like take the enormity of playing Red Rocks and let's dial it back to like early in Judah and the Lions career. Like, do you have a memory of just like one of those, like small club shows or like, something where like just the atmosphere was just so raucous and it just made you feel like, holy shit, like this is rock and roll. Like, do you have any of those experiences, like playing smaller, cramped ass, hot, sweaty places that like you just like, Red Rocks is up here, but this is right below it?
Totally. I guess there's probably two that I think encompass that the best. And it's one at the 40 Watt in Athens, Georgia. Sort of a legendary small club. I think it holds about 500 people.
Okay.
A lot of artists have come from that area, and that's sort of their main place. And it's close to Nashville too. So that was it was kind of in the circle of, we hit a lot of college towns when we were first starting out. And I think that was a big goal for us at the time. And like our manager was like, it's way too bold. You can't do that yet. And we're like, no, we're going to do it. And for some reason, somehow it sold out. And I think that was the first moment where we're like, okay, this is a real possibility. I think that was the fall of 2013.
Nice.
So definitely early on. Then the other one, which I think has been able to really give us good perspective, but we played at the Larimer Lounge in Denver. I think it was November of 2014. And that's a small club, holds 200 people. Like you can almost touch the ceiling. Stage is way too small, just gross, but also perfect kind of vibe. And that was our first like real show in Denver. And then before we did Red Rocks last year, we got to play there again, just as sort of a special intimate event. And it was nuts, but it was just kind of like, okay, going from there to the same venue, I guess 6 years later or 5 years later, and how much things have changed, but how special this still feels. And it's really awesome to be able to get to do those smaller events still, even though we can't fit any of our production in there and it's sweaty as heck and and all this stuff.
But I think that's one of like the sweetest things. Like I remember in back when I lived in New York City, the old thing, bands would come through and play like St. Vitus in Brooklyn, this like club in Brooklyn, which is just like, just kind of like a divey bar, holds maybe 200 people. And, it would be like the tune-up show before like you go play, one of the larger venues, Terminal 5 or whatever it was. And, like I think even like Jawbreaker, like when they announced that they were coming back, like I think they even came through St. Vitus. And it's just one of those things where like, the pageantry of like a humongous show and like with the whole with all of the production and everything is fantastic because of the kind of awe that it inspires. But there's something so like visceral about just playing to like 200 people where like people can like barely move, and it's just makes it so much more intimate. And I feel like you can like just kind of spread your wings a little bit more. I think there's something so great about that. And it's awesome to know that like, you could still hang on to those experiences, being that, now your show, as they call it, is so much more broad. But, as far as like your show is concerned, and of course now we're talking, deep into a pandemic as it were. So, I'm sure it's been a while, but, so I know that Judah and the Lion is really comprised of the three of you guys, but when you guys go out and play, how many other musicians do you guys usually bring along with you? Like, how is the instrumentation, when you guys are playing like a full show, let's say?
Yeah, we when we perform live, we're typically doing 6 people.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll do like acoustic radio promo events and stuff like that, where it'll just be the 3 of us, but our more fleshed out representation of our record when we're performing, it's 6 of us, and that would be another electric guitar player, a drummer, and then our 6th position has kind of fluctuated over the last few years, but now it's someone that's kind of doing a lot of the electronic production triggers and stuff like that, but he's also a really amazing drummer, so he has a percussion setup as well. And then when our main drummer can't be there, that guy will just swap over and we'll become 5 for those certain shows. But traditionally we'll go for 6, and that's been our setup for a few years now. And I think, assuming everybody, I guess who knows really what everything will look like after the pandemic, right? But if everyone can and is willing, that's hopefully our setup that we'll continue with.
Do you guys bring a bass player out with you?
We have before, and that's, again, the 6th position is kind of fluctuating depending on the event we're doing. But part of what Garrett will do is he has a Moog synthesizer bass, and he'll also play a guitar sometimes that will have the bass notes coming through it. So it's not a traditional bass, but in some of our songs we've done this year, we have a very like Beautiful Anyway, there's for sure an electric bass in there.
Like a real bass line in there, for sure.
Yeah, and we haven't been able to perform that live or figure out how we want to do that. So there's been talks too of like getting Garrett to learn how to play bass so he can just swap that over rather than.
Poor Garrett, man, just like got to do everything.
He's got a master's in music, so he can.
Oh, so he's fine. Yeah,
he's asking for it. Yeah, but that's our traditional setup for sure.
Sweet.
Cool. So, Nate, you mentioned early on that you were a fan of pop punk music as a youngin. So, as you start hitting the road, I've seen that you guys have played with Jimmy Eat World, but like, are there any other like bands from your childhood that you kind of like were like, oh, I'd love to play with this band, even though they don't necessarily like fit the indie folk world, but like you somehow landed a show with them?
No, Jimmy was definitely the main one for that. And that tour was nuts. It was us, Jimmy, then Incubus. So I was felt like we were way out of our league there. But, and that was fun too. I met, Mr. Jim on the first night, And I was like, hey, I'm a big fan. He's like, oh yeah, we're just out here. It's a rock and roll summer camp. And then he just walked away. I was like, all right, that is exactly what that tour was. And it was awesome. But I mean, I guess you could throw Weezer in there. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch genre wise, but no, I think a lot of the artists that I would, really prefer or looked up to at that time, just haven't quite got to. I wish maybe we could mesh more with like Sum 41 or Yellow Card or that sort of vibe, but it feels like a little bit too off. But
I don't know if that's too far off, because Ryan, the vocalist for Yellow Card, is now like a Nashville resident and does a lot of like the acoustic solo folk music kind of stuff.
It's true. So. Okay, I need to connect with him. But I think the next generation, like I guess the next closest thing would be Paramore. We've gotten to do a lot of stuff with them. I wasn't as big of a fan growing up, but definitely had awareness. But and they've become close friends of ours, and particularly Judah. And I think if I lived in Nashville, it'd be a little easier. But he's keeping that connection alive. But yeah, I don't know. I always thought it'd be fun to go on Warped Tour, as grimy and grungy as that would be, but getting to have that experience. I think when I was streaming when I was younger, that was more of the route that if it were all up to me, I maybe would have gone. But I'm glad to be a part of a team with different ideas and to be where we're at.
And I got to tell you the truth, like realistically, I mean, like, will Warped Tour ever come back? The answer to that, especially in the world we're living in, is probably a hard no. But let's just theorize. But let's just theorize here that everyone gets healthy. We're able to nip this pandemic, and Kevin Lyman decides like, hey, we're all healthy. Let's bring Warped Tour back. Like, there is no reason that like Judah and the Lion couldn't play Warped Tour, because I mean, let's be honest, like, you guys toured with 21 Pilots, and I mean, 21 Pilots like has been on Warped Tour and will probably still fit on Warped Tour. And I mean, like, even if you look way back into like the Warped Tour of the 90s, I mean, yeah, it was always, Effects and your Lagwagon, but I mean, Eminem played Warped Tour, like it's like, I remember some of my favorite bands like in the 2000s that never would have fit on Warped Tour in terms of it being a punk rock festival when it like broadened. I remember seeing Something Corporate on Warped Tour. I remember seeing Ozma on Warped Tour. All of these great bands. So I mean, like, I guarantee you, like, if Warped Tour comes back in some capacity, like, you're gonna get a call. Like, you think you won't, but you're gonna get a call, and they're gonna be like, hey, you guys want to play main stage? And you'll be like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. But as far as just talking Warped Tour real quick, I don't know if you're like me and you've been to like almost every Warped Tour that's ever been, but do you have any like interesting or cool Warped Tour stories that you can remember from when you were a youngin'?
I only got to go to one, and it was summer of 16. So one of the last.
One of the last.
And largely because when I wanted to go when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to.
Oh, bummer.
And then got to college, and they didn't have a Nashville stopover for a few years when I probably would have been able to go.
Yeah.
And then they added it, but then we started touring, so I was always gone. And then summer of 16 had the opportunity to go in Chicago, and it was incredible. And I just like, I'd heard all about it. I have all the compilation CDs they'd put out, would watch videos, but I didn't really understand how it went or what the like rules were or what it was like. And so
there's rules.
Well, I guess just more so like it's not a normal festival at all where like, when every band's playing, where they're playing. And so one of the biggest shocks was getting there like right before doors open. And then I was with my buddy who was more of a veteran. He's like, yeah, they just announced when every band's playing, Yellow Card goes on at 11. I was like, what the hell? And so like doors open, and I was expecting, them to headline and all this stuff. And, probably the main band that I'm there for is the first band out of the gate. So just like, okay, here we go. So just book it in, try and get as close to the front as possible for Yellow Card. And then it just kind of was a free for all the rest of the day. But
so back in the day, and I'm sure it was probably the way this whole on the whole tour, but they would have this enormous, like inflatable,
Set time
I don't
list.
even
Yeah, like a
like
set list.
set time list. Like it was like a humongous like balloon, and you would
Okay.
just like walk in and you'd see all the set times on this list. And like this is like back in the day when like, you know, maybe if you were lucky, like you had like a clamshell shitty flip phone that you could like take a picture of it.
Yeah.
But like if not, like you'd literally like have to like, okay, like you like write shit on your arm or your hand, or if you were smart, you'd bring out like a little notepad in your back pocket.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like to say that it was like lawless is like 100% right on the nose, because it was like, you know, like talking to you, you know, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which I'll get to right after this, being that, you know, looking over your body of work, I mean, you guys have played like every festival that there is to play. And I just kind of wanted your input on that. But Warped Tour itself was just like, you know what you're getting into. Like, you know that they're only going to be 30-minute sets. So, you know, like, you know, Rancid's still going to be able to play 20 songs somehow in 30 minutes, but like all of your favorite bands are only going to play maybe 8 or 9 songs, and it's going to be, the sun is going to be beating down on you, and you're going to be dehydrated and want to die. But like, that was the best thing about it. Like, you know, when Warped Tour in New York was on Randall's Island, like you knew whatever part of your body wasn't covered in a piece of clothing was just going to get dark with dirt.
Yep.
And like, I remember like, just like my snot was like brown and black for like a week, but it was like a badge of honor, you know. So
right.
I think that's like Warped Tour in a nutshell. But yeah, so you know, you guys have, I mean, like it's like staggering all of the different festivals you guys have played, and all of like the, you know, like Good Morning Americas, and you know, all like the late night shows and stuff. So any interesting experiences or like funny stories that maybe you could tell about, you know, a festival that you played, or, you know, playing like one of those like late night shows, or like anything that kind of strikes up where you think, oh my gosh, yeah, this happened and this was wild.
Totally. I think some of it just comes from like remembering or learning that everyone's a regular ass person. And so like a couple things with Billie Eilish that I think are particularly funny and awesome. She was like mega famous on Instagram before she blew up music wise. So yeah. I didn't, you know, I wasn't aware on the Instagram side, but I was on the same flight as her and her brother on the way to, I think it was a radio festival in San Francisco. I forget the name of it, but not one of the more, it wasn't like Outside Lands or something like that. But, and she went on before us because it was like just right when she was getting her radio presence started. Mm-hmm. And just watching her with her brother, and I think their mom was with them too. And they were just like, obviously she looks striking. So I was like, who the hell is this like kid that just looks so like oddly dressed, but also has that vibe of like, I'm a big deal.
Yeah.
And not, I mean, I got to hear her talk and she was kind, but it just, you could tell, you can kind of tell when someone's when you're out of the loop, maybe on something you should know more about. And just seeing her doing normal things and then, you know, go to the show and then watch her performance. And I was like, this is interesting. This is kind of weird. And then we played Austin City Limits last fall, and she was one of the headliners. So like seeing her transformation and performing through, because I think we've done 4 or 5 festivals where she's been performing on some level. So it's been cool to see her grow, but also like, you know, she's back in the artist area where we're all hanging out, and she's just like sitting at a picnic bench eating a sandwich, just like, you're so normal, but also not. And I think those are the kinds of moments that I'm really appreciative of, or kind of more interesting. Or like when we played Letterman, which was the first kind of late night show we ever did back in 2015. You know, he's really, like, he was kind to us, and he's such a big deal. And that was, I think, his last year. So there's a lot more kind of pomp and circumstance around the set and things like that. But
sure,
one of the most striking things to me was literally 5 minutes after we get off and the show ends, he's in shorts and like a tank top eating ramen noodles just in the back. Like, again, just being, this is my job. Like, whatever, I'm thankful for this, and I'm just going to hang. Like, just such a funny thing. And we did James Corden a couple years later, and one of my best friends was living in LA at the time, and so he got to come hang out with us, and he had to take a phone call in our green room. Like if we needed to go outside to have a smoke or anything like that, was to the roof. And I guess James has another door that he can go out and smoke and chill on the roof or whatever. But my friend Luke got locked out from getting back in, and then was kind of like trying to, I don't know what to do. Crap. Like he couldn't call us either because we were about to go on and didn't have our phones or whatever. But James was out there at the time, and like they just hit it off, had a great conversation, and then brought him in and everything. And just hearing Luke talk about how just, again, sort of kind and thoughtful and helpful James was. I think those are my favorite stories, when you just get to sort of appreciate that these people are people and they're trying to be helpful. And that's not always the case. And, we all have our bad days, and
sure,
I've seen some of that too for different people. But I'm trying to understand their perspective on why that might be and things like that. But I just love when you hear those kinds of things. It's like, okay, that's just a normal ass dude trying to live a normal life.
Yep.
In the midst of the chaos. So
exactly. Yeah. Live a normal life. Yeah. I love it.
Now you kind of mentioned like just these encounters with these like big names that normal people would kind of like lose their cool over. But like with the cool shit that you've done, I'm sure that there's professional athletes who know of your band and are legit fans of your band. So like, have any like hockey players or soccer players come to some of your shows and like introduce themselves to you, and you kind of like lost your cool over that?
I think, and I'm gonna, JJ Redick's basketball player, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I should know. I know he plays sports, so I was like, is it Josh? JJ. He's boys with Judah. And he came out to a Red Rock show, and I was kind of out in the parking lot beforehand trying to catch up with all my high school buddies that were there and just say what up and all this. And JJ walks up to me, and I didn't even know what he looks like, but he just like, hey dude, it's me, JJ, stoked to see your show. And then I wasn't super aware of what was going on, but as soon as that interaction ended, another friend came and was like, bro, do you know who that was? I'm like, oh, I guess that's not really answering your question. But I think for me, as of now anyway, I was at the X Games last year and got to hang with some of the like Jack Matrani and Scotty Lego, who are two of my favorite snowboarders. And getting to hear them talk about how excited they were to hang out with me was a really humbling experience, because to me, I'm like, oh, you guys are my, like, you're, and it would just, I think, it was set up by a mutual friend to like get to hang with them and all that, but I felt like I had to show my sort of credentials and resume to get time with them, and then to hear them be like, dude, we were so stoked when we heard that you wanted. I was like, okay, what is this? Like, I'm just Nate, like I'm the normal kid that I don't know. I went back to my childhood self looking up to these guys, and not that they're that old, but even in like high school, early college, when I was like, saw The Art of Flight, and Scotty's just hucking it and doing all this gnarly stuff, and to then appreciate that he was a fan of what I was doing was just something I never expected. And so I try to, it's one of those things that like, I want to stay humble and I want to be appreciative of everything, but I also, need to remember that there's a chance someone might like what I do and can contribute in the same way that I look up to them. And I'm really honored to be in that position. But yeah, that's probably I don't know. I hope I'm answering your questions well.
No, dude, that was super insightful and cool. I enjoyed hearing that story.
So just to kind of bring this full circle, I'm just kind of interested in hearing your perspective on, what you think the Avs are set up for this year. I mean, you're talking a pretty stacked team. I mean, between, obviously Nate McKinnon and Landeskog and, all these guys, obviously scooping up Braden Holtby, signing, Pietrangelo. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at the Avs to be one of the powerhouses out of the West, but, we're talking a completely different Western Conference in where we're playing all the same teams 8 times. So
right.
Do you have any specific other than, of course, hoisting the cup, because that's what everybody wants, but like, what are your expectations for this season? Who are you looking at in terms of who you think the breakout star is going to be that maybe isn't Nate McKinnon? Anything you're looking at specifically?
I think a lot of what people are saying is very fair and realistic, and saying that we have a pretty good shot, if not the shot. If I've learned anything, though, that with any team, or that doesn't mean a whole lot until it actually happens. So
you actually get there,
yeah, hold that lightly and stay optimistic. But I do think this is the first year in recent memory where I haven't really had to convince anyone that that's a real. I think we've been a very good fighting force and presence and deserving of a playoff spot, and I think people would admit to that. But I feel like this is the first year I can remember in a long time where it's like, okay, if we don't win, something kind of went wrong in some ways. So I'm stoked about that. Hold that again lightly, see what happens. I think if we have anything that makes me particularly nervous, it's our goaltenders. We've got some great guys, but I don't think that I've seen or believe in their consistency. And I think with the way that this year is going to play out, with them sort of, doing a 60-40 split, I think is the current plan. And we'll see if that holds true for the rest of the season. But I think that's the only part where I'm like, I don't feel super confident here. I feel like if they can do a good job, the rest of the team can carry us. But if they start to have some rough patches, we could see some real issues. I don't think we have any issues on the goal scoring front, but as to how many goals we let in, that'll be a different story. But I'm pumped on some of our young defenders coming in. I think my favorite player right now is Calvert. Got to go to a good bit of games last year, and just watching him play was really exciting. But I know he's not alone in kind of that young force that's coming in and complementing our up front guys. But yeah, we'll see. And I'm also really excited because this is probably going to be the first full year that I'm in Colorado since high school. And so getting to, we can't go to games right now, but optimistic that maybe later on that'll change. But just even getting to, I don't have to juggle, do we have a show tonight, or do I have to go to a meeting or something, and can I catch a game? And so a lot of these guys too, I've heard a lot about, but haven't gotten to watch as closely as, I would have liked, or what I grew up with some of those guys. And so got a pub right like 50 yards across the street from where I live right now that puts on the game every game. And so I'm looking forward to getting to dive in, and it's fun to be around people that care about the team. And that's another thing too, that, I can go watch the Avs game, but I have to find a bar on tour, and then I'll be the only guy that actually gives a shit about the Avs while I'm there. And it's fun to be back in a spot where, I'm able to learn from other people and get to share the sort of excitement with everyone there as well. And so I think it's going to be a little bit of a renaissance time for me to really get to enjoy the season in the midst of, and I saw that with, the playoffs this year. That was really fun in the midst of all the other crap going on, but getting to watch every game and dive in and be more involved in that was really exciting. So,
hell yeah.
I want to act like I know everything, but I also have a lot to learn. And, but I'm looking forward to getting to know these guys more and see how they play together and kind of the new experience and all that. So
you don't have to worry about that, because I'm absolutely going to end up getting flamed for this later. But like, I was looking up like, the Avs roster to talk about people other than Nathan McKinnon. And like, I ended up pulling up some sort of like fantasy roster. So like, Holtby's not on the Avalanche, and neither is Pietrangelo. Like, I don't know what the fuck, but that just made me look like a whole ass dummy. But at least
I wasn't gonna call you out on it. And
no, you should have.
Fully aware.
You absolutely should have. You should have been like, what are you talking about? I mean, at least I got like Landeskog and McKinnon, right? Like, those were two guys that I knew. But like,
right.
I'm looking at this roster, and as I'm saying it, I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, Holtby signed with the Canucks. And then like, I look like down, and there's like a bunch of like posts under this roster like cool fantasy roster, and I'm like, oh shit. Well, so and we're not the fancy kind of podcast that's going to edit that out, so it's gonna go live, and I'm gonna eat a plate of shit for it. So
well, I'm sorry, man.
No, it's not your fault. It's totally not your fault. And let this be a lesson to all of you youngsters out there who might want to start a hockey and music podcast. Make sure you're looking up the rosters correctly. Otherwise, you're gonna look like a dummy. So I'm looking directly into the camera to let you know. Don't be a dummy.
Hey,
be smart.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all good.
So we've been chatting for a while. It's been fantastic. So the one last question I have for you, and I told you I was going to bring it up, and I'm going to bring it up. How did Sports make it onto that record? Sports with a Z, by the way.
Yes, very important. We have a group of friends in Nashville, sort of led by the guy that does all of our music videos. His name's Matt, and he is an incredible artist. Really in every sense of the word, super creative, really good at music, really good at film, photography, all the things. And good enough, I think, at each of those if he really made a good run, he could do any of them, but he's chosen the film side, and super proud of him. He's crushing it. But he is, one of his biggest hobbies is just to make music that is funny and call the bands really stupid names. I think his latest is Dad Meat, and a few others that just are like, what the hell? But he puts on these little punk house shows, and he'll invite other bands, and then they'll close it out. And it's just, our electric guitar player plays with them as well, and a couple of our other guys have subbed in just here and there, and I'm hoping to get my call someday. But he wrote Sports, and it was kind of one of those that every time they would play it, we all got super excited, and we just felt like it would be a fun idea if we could kind of make our own rendition and put it on a record. And so he allowed us to do that, and he actually played guitar and sang on it with us. And now when we perform it live and he's in town, he'll hop up and perform it with us too. But felt like just sort of with the heaviness and honesty of that record as a whole, we kind of wanted to close it out with something a little bit more lighthearted and but also representative of who we are. And I felt like for me in particular, it was kind of a Hail Mary to my childhood. And I hope, part of me was like, can we please just make punk folk music, please? Just do a whole record like this. That's all I want to do. And it felt like for that day in the studio, it was a real gift. And I'll remember that forever. But yeah, we love Sports. That's what it's about. And it felt like a really funny way. And I think a lot of people probably don't appreciate that was maybe a more honest representation than they may be aware of with some of our who we are and what we like. But it felt like a really fun way to do that. So we do love Sports. We love punk music, and it was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So yeah,
dude, Nate, man, we're really in depth to you. This was just an awesome conversation, and we really do appreciate the time you gave us.
Dude, well, I'm honored to be on here, and I was out skiing with a buddy today and told him what I was doing tonight, and I get to do a lot of interviews and things like that, but I really love the ones where I get to talk about things that aren't just the music side of things. So thankful for you all asking questions about that side, but also getting to talk about another side of who I am and what I love. And so thank you for having me, and would love to be on another time if I can help you out or be a part of something else going on. And if we ever get back to being in person, hope to hang with y'all.
Yeah, we'll do a digital handshake right now between your camp and our camp. If the Avs and the Islanders end up being in the Cup Finals, we'll have you on, and we'll live stream a game, and we'll really get to the crux of what Nate is all about when it's in the thick of it, you know.
That would be awesome. Let's hope for both of our sakes.
Yeah, definitely, man. So again, Nate, thank you so much for your time. Judah and the Lion, if you haven't heard of them, I don't know what rock you're living under, but get the hell out of that rock. and go give them a listen. Totally great stuff. Pep Talks is a fantastic record, and we love sports, we love balls.
Great reference.
All right, Nate. Thank you so much, man. You have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Too.